Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure to be here today with Darcel Elliott, who I know kind of well, used to work in the same office as her for a little while there, a couple of stints back in the old Doss Williams days. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time, Darcel, to sit down and talk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a little bit hot out today, but it's Hot-tober. That's now I've officially put that out there. That's my trademark.
Yeah, Hot-tober. Yeah, it was like 79. I like it was so hot. I looked at it. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a warm day today. But I want to talk to you because you are the chair of the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party. So you have a very prominent, important role here in this town in terms of trying to organize, trying to build, try to boost, try to support elected Democrats, and a variety of other things. So I want to talk to you about the Santa Barbara mayoral election, city council election. Let's see if we can just sort of start there. We've got a mayoral election. We've got an incumbent in Cathy Murillo, who's looking to run for a second term. And she's facing, obviously, we got a strong challenger in Randy Rowse, who's this moderate, conservative, former council member, has a lot of support from different parts of the community. But Cathy's also facing some challenges from other Democrats. You see Joyce, who you know well, used to work with, Deborah Schwartz, who you know well, and then other people sort of, down ballot. But with those sort of four people at the top, can you talk to me a little bit about your thoughts going into this election as party chair, and what are you concerned about? What are you worried about? What's going on as we approach this election?
Yeah, I was sort of bummed going into this election because, as you mentioned, I know Deborah and James well. James is like a brother to me. He's like part of my political family. We worked on Doss's 2010 campaign together. And when you organize with someone on a campaign, you're sort of bonded for life. So, I'm really close with James and Deborah. I was the organizing director for the Democratic Party for the 2011 city council race. So I worked really hard to elect Deborah to the city council in 2011 when, she was successful. Cathy also ran that year at EF Falcone. So, so I respect both James and Deborah, and I'm close to them as individuals, and I think they have a lot to offer our community. And so I was pretty bummed to see them running against Cathy, and because I think Cathy's done a great job as mayor. I think she's pushed through a lot of really great policies. I think this has been, not just Cathy. We also have Kristen standing up for re-election, and Meagan Harmon. Eric Friedman's up for re-election, but he doesn't have an opponent. This city council has been probably one of the most productive that I've seen. I've only been here 13 years now, but in politics, but they've been really productive in passing major progressive policies, and so that's a little bit disheartening to see. So I wasn't looking forward to this one. I'm not running. We're not running a campaign against Deborah or James. We're running a campaign for Cathy and Kristen and Meagan. So sort of coming in, I was like, I'm glad this is the last odd year of city council elections.
Yeah, well, it's put people in really tough spots who are loyal to the Democratic Party and who they endorse. You've got people who are torn. Like, do I support Cathy again, even though maybe I don't agree with everything going on with the city? Do I give somebody else a chance, knowing that James has been involved with, he worked for Doss Williams, he worked for Hannah Beth Jackson, and to a degree, he's a party person, has been involved with the party. What would you say to sort of somebody who's sort of like struggling, like what do I do? Because the media does this calculus. I don't know how true it is, or if you guys think about it too, but it's like, the more votes James gets, the less votes Cathy's going to get, and Randy's going to be the mayor. So can you talk a little bit about sort of your thoughts on that whole scenario?
Well, you said sort of what at the Democratic Party our big fear is. I think when Randy Rowse entered the the fray. It sort of changed the dynamic of the election. If this was an open seat, it would be a totally different conversation, right? But when you have an incumbent who has a voting record, who has a track record, and I mean, we're Democrats, so well, I think just in general, whether you're a Democrat or not, there is no elected official that's going to do 100% of what you want 100% of the time. No human being is going to do 100% of what you want 100% of the time. So, but in terms of the Democratic Party's platform, which, is on our website, and it was developed by our platform committee through public meetings and voted on by our Democratic Central Committee, which is a democratically elected body. So, that platform is sort of, that's how it's developed. But being a Democrat, it's a really big tent. And so you're going to have people who disagree with aspects of that platform, even if that's what sort of came through. And you're going to have people disagreeing with things that Cathy did as mayor, even though, her policies have been very much in line with the Democratic Party platform. And so that's one thing is, Cathy's voting record. And then the other thing is just what you said of the fear of Randy getting in. It would be our first conservative mayor in like at least 30 years. I don't know the party preference of people before Sheila Lodge, but I think that's a real fear for people and not wanting that. And so I think, that's been compelling people to support Cathy in this crowded race.
Now, there's probably a couple people watching or listening who are going to say, oh my goodness, I can't believe James is only seen as sort of a factor in the larger equation of whether Cathy or Randy's going to win. There are people who say, well, James can win. Why not? You vote for who you like, and they've got just as much shot as anybody else. Can you talk a little bit about what that really means from an organization perspective? Can anybody win? Why are we only talking about it in the context of, it's not that James is going to win, it's that James is going to cause Randy to win. Can you talk, like, what is that math about? Like, why do people think like that?
Well, and I think, I think earlier on, that was definitely a conversation, right? Like, maybe, I notice you're not talking about Deborah, but one thing with Deborah is when she ran for city council, she came in 6th place. Yeah. So that's sort of a calculation that we have concrete data on, right?
Yeah.
And with James, he's never run for office before. And, I know that there are people who say we shouldn't go by fundraising and things like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you need money to run a campaign. And you need money to be on TV, to send mailers out. The Democratic Party operation, it's a large operation. We have a significant number of volunteers. Although, people don't volunteer with us if they don't support the candidates that we're supporting. So that's, it's not like we have a bunch of people who are just mindlessly sheeping, coming in and just doing what we say. They care about these candidates. They care about the policies that they've passed and talking to voters about those policies. And, we've been doing that since July this year because of the recall election. So that put us on a totally different timeline where we usually wouldn't start until late August, early September. We started in July. And so, I know James was out there canvassing too, because I've seen him and talked to him, and we worked on a campaign together. We were organized in the same school of organizing. But you just don't have those numbers out there to talk to enough voters to get that plurality because again, you don't need a majority vote, but you do need a plurality. And does he have the resources and the campaign organization to get out there and talk to enough voters to make that happen? And I haven't not seen that personally. But I don't know. So.
Yeah. And it's really hard to oust an incumbent. And in this case, you've got people who vote in Santa Barbara elections. They know Randy Rowse. He's been on the ballot. His name's been on there, and they know Cathy. And so these are familiar names. And so now you've got some other people on the ballot. As you noted, Deborah ran for city council. Didn't go very well for her. She's back there. But of course, she's a Democrat. She's a factor here. She'll take some votes away from probably Randy too a little bit because, she's had to play a little bit of that sort of moderate be in that kind of moderate space that appeals to Randy. So I guess the big question is, I know you don't want to reveal sort of like what's behind the curtain, but how much of a concern do you have about Cathy at this moment not getting reelected, because there are strong Democrats in the race and because you have a strong moderate right-leaning, candidate in the race?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very concerned about Randy getting elected. And that's why I'm out there every single weekend knocking on doors, and actually I've started doing weekdays. Also, we've had volunteers going out on weekdays. And I'm having really good talks with voters, and I think some people, are undecided. They're like, there's so many candidates here. And then a lot of people I talk to are like, yeah, of course I voted for Cathy before, I'll vote for her again. And so, and then also, and part of my conversation I had with James when he was first considering running was I ran against an incumbent. You'll remember, maybe your listeners won't, but I ran in 2018 for Santa Barbara City College against a board of trustees against an incumbent. Yeah. And, I told him being an incumbent is very hard. It's very, very hard. And I had the Democratic Party support. I was out there walking every single day, talking to voters, and, I still was getting people. It was a slightly different election. People didn't know race was even on the ballot, but it's really challenging. And when in doubt, people on their ballot sort of default to the incumbent if they think things are going fine.
Yeah. I don't know if you listen to my podcast with Darcel Hall, who is a former chair of the party and has done a lot of stuff statewide as well. And I know him from back in the day, so I like talking to him. And when we can record our conversations and talk about what we talk about, it's even better. I want to know, I want to ask you sort of the same question about gender and race as it relates to Cathy. Do you feel as though Cathy has some barriers to overcome that maybe a different candidate wouldn't have to, because she's Mexican American, she's a Latina, and she's judged in ways that maybe Randy Rowse isn't judged? And to what degree, if that's true, does that play into sort of this whole discussion and debate about whether to vote for her again?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. Before I even became party chair, I've sat down with a lot of our, particularly women of color, who are elected or who have decided to run for office, because that is actually a demographic that we're very low in terms of representation in our South County elected officials. We're really good at electing women. We have a good number of women elected, but not a lot of women of color. And I'm always, talking to these women of color and just how challenging it is, because it feels like you have to be perfect every time. Like, you cannot make a mistake because it will count double against you that it counts against, a person who isn't of color or a man. And so I think that absolutely is a challenge and a barrier that Cathy overcomes and has to overcome. But I also think it's one of her biggest strengths. We have a lot of women of color in the city, and she, they see her when they, not every woman of color is going to see themselves in Cathy, but it's representation matters. Seeing someone who looks like you in a position of power is important, and I think that is a benefit that Cathy is.
Yeah, I mean, Santa Barbara, you look at the school district, it's almost 65% we're talking about Latinos who attend our public schools. And I think the city population may be around 40-ish%. And when they see Cathy or when they see Alejandra or Oscar, it helps them sort of say to them, whoa, maybe I can be like that, when you see yourself reflected. And that's, I think, something a lot of people take for granted. Like, I don't think if you're not a person of color, you necessarily think like that. But if you're looking for people like you doing successful things, it helps to know that you can find them on the city council or in these positions. It's not just all one type of person. So, and I've seen Cathy with young people, young, various groups, organizations, and she really resonates well, with them. So I definitely, she's got some things to overcome that other people don't. And I think it's a challenge because the city's kind of in shambles. You don't have to go there, but we've had high turnover. People are leaving. There's been lots of change. City administrators leaving. Obviously, we've had COVID. There's lots of impacts there. We've had lots of things that are out of her control, but she is the mayor. And of course, people are going to say, you're the mayor. So let's get somebody else in there. Let's talk about the city council. Meagan Harmon is running for re-election in District 6. She's appointed. This is the first time she's on the ballot. And it looked like she was going to skate. It looked like she was going to just get elected, not really have a legitimate challenger. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Nina Johnson, who worked for the city for a long time, says she's going to run. Can you talk about what that meant from the party's perspective in terms of repositioning or recalibrating, and what that discussion was like when you had somebody who's got a name, at least in terms of city government circles?
Well, you know me well, Josh, but for those of you who don't know me well, I always run everything as if there's going to be an opponent. And so I was telling Meagan, you got to make sure you fundraise and you got to, make sure you're doing all of these things. Just the advice I was giving her, as if you have an opponent. Even if you don't have an opponent, you just have to, still run like you're running against someone. And I think, after she actually did have an opponent, fundraising and such became a little bit easier for her. I know, Nina's being supported by a lot of businesses and property owners in the community, so she's doing really well with fundraising. But other folks have now started to step up for Meagan to support her and keep her in office. So I think that was sort of the biggest change, is that it became easier for Meagan doing what she was already doing. Easier in terms of people understood the importance. Everything else became harder, but so we were already starting to canvass in the 6th district. We also, because we really focused for the recall in the east side, west side, downtown areas, because those were the areas where turnout was lower. And so we were heavily in those areas before the recall election. So.
What do you think of Meagan Harmon? Darcel mentioned on the podcast, the party kind of got lucky because, had this appointment process when Greg Hart was stepping off, and there were a whole bunch of people who ran, and there were some perceptions about who was going to get it and who wasn't. And all of a sudden Meagan Harmon shows up and, grew up in Lompoc, been in Santa Barbara for a couple of years, and gets enough votes. And all of a sudden there she is. And ever since then, she's been pretty strong on the issues that the party cares about. Do you feel like you sort of got lucky? She didn't come up the traditional organizational ranks, she just kind of appeared one day and now she's a party person. How do you feel about, how she's done?
That's funny to ask me, because in my day job, I work for Darcel Williams, our county supervisor. And so Meagan was our housing authority commissioner when she applied. So we had to interview Meagan for that position. And it's no surprise, right, that she's so strong in housing, which Josh knows is an important issue to my boss, Doss, but also to me. And so, she already had all of those values in place, and that's why we appointed her to the housing authority. So I wasn't surprised to see her. And she was also involved with Women's Political Committee. She had also been coming to canvass every weekend since early 2018. At least I started seeing her and Mara at the office. So she was already pretty involved.
Okay, so she had put in some of the work, and you're right, I had forgotten about that housing authority position. Let's talk about the other race real briefly. It's very clear from a party perspective who the candidate is in this one, because you've got Kristen Sneddon, environmentalist, Democrat endorsed by the party, and you have Barrett Reed, who's not a Republican, but he's a conservative, and I think he's been registered Republican in the past, but he's a conservative guy. And, I'm not saying that as disparaging. That's what he is. And he's raised a lot of money, and he's trying to oust an incumbent. What are your thoughts on this race? It's a lot of money. He's raised more than $200,000, and I think Kristen was at like 60 something last time I did the reporting. I know those numbers are a little higher now, but is this going to be, this is a threat, right? This is a challenge, all of that money. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think we definitely approached it as such. And I've been canvassing in Kristen's district pretty much nonstop for the last month. And I haven't gotten anyone who is voting for Barrett Reed yet. And so, I mean, I'm canvassing more in the flatlands. Kristen's covering herself, covering the hillier areas, the Riviera and such that are in her district. I've had Barrett is working it. I mean, we were talking about having the organization and stuff. I mean, I think he definitely has the organization to sort of overcome incumbency, the money wise, and he's walking and talking to voters and stuff. But I think his platform is way off. I talked to voters and they say, oh yeah, Barrett Reed came to my door, but he seemed really out of touch. And so he seemed sort of not, to know really what was going on with the city and stuff like that. And so that, they just didn't feel like he represented their own views towards Santa Barbara. And you take that in hand with Kristen being an incumbent, representing that district well. That is it's a heavy Dem district, but it's a more conservative Democratic crowd. And so I feel strong about Kristen. But I was very worried going into it. So.
And the party endorsed her this time. She was not endorsed the first time. I know you were not chair at that time, but you were involved. What was the biggest difference that made the party say, okay, we're gonna back you? I know that they're going against Barrett Reed, but I mean, what is it that you saw in Kristen that maybe the party didn't see the first time?
Well, she didn't. She jumped in the race late last time, if you recall, right before filing, so the party had just already made its endorsement and had started its campaign. But I think Kristen is obviously has a lot of progressive values with environment in particular, but also she's really been an advocate for social justice and racial justice issues since. In the last couple of years also. And so, one area I'm always talking with her on is housing, because I have a sort of a different view on housing than she does on some things. But, I think that is appropriate for her district. I think her views are appropriate for her district. And, she did support the housing project on the Carrillo Castillo lot. Which is, rent capped for working families and stuff. So she's following through with, what she's been saying, that she wants, literal affordable housing. And so, I appreciate that about her. So, so I definitely advocated for us endorsing her. I feel good about her endorsement. So.
Good. Now, you're fairly new in this position. You're the new chair. I think you've been doing it, about a year now, a little less than a year?
Since February.
Since February, okay. So can you talk about, for people who may not know the scope of what the party is and what it does, and what are some of the things you're working on that might be a little different than in the past? This is not just Santa Barbara City Council elections that the party's concerned about. It's much broader. So can you talk a little bit about what the party does and its reach?
Yeah, so the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party is a subsection of the state Democratic Party, but it's its own entity. We are governed by a 35-member, that's just the number of people we have right now. It's not dictated at 35. 35-member body called the Democratic Central Committee. I'm the chair of that body. So we have an executive board, and so I'm the chair of that body. And our bylaws state that the chair is the spokesperson for the party and supervises the staff and everything like that. So and I personally have been working in Santa Barbara County politics for 13 years now, and I've worked on a variety of campaigns. I'm from Santa Maria, so I'm from our North County, and I've worked on county-wide campaigns and ballot measures. I've worked on stuff in Ventura County as well. So, the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party has an organization that's countywide. Historically, most of our resources have been focused in South County, just because that's where a lot of our Democrats are. But we have these really powerful clubs in North County. We have the Santa Ynez Valley Democratic Organization, the Lompoc Valley Democratic Club, and the Democratic Club of Santa Maria Valley also. And they've been sort of the people doing all the work in North County forever. And recently, we've had a lot of successful wins. We've got Gloria Soto elected to the Santa Maria City Council, Jeremy Ball elected to the Lompoc City Council, the first Democrat elected to that council in a number of years. We got in Buellton, we have a city council member who was the first person elected as a Democrat. She's not the only Democrat on the board, but she's the only one that sought the Democratic Party endorsement. And we also got a school board member in Lompoc and a school board member in the Santa Ynez Valley. So that all happened in the last 2 years. So trying to capitalize on that strength and keep that going. We just hired a North County organizer. So we have an organizing director, Spencer Brandt, who oversees all of our organizing throughout the county. And then this North County organizer is specifically focused on North County and trying to build up our base there further and make more inroads and build on our recent successes. And his name is Giovanni Medina, and he just started at the beginning of October. So including running all the Santa Barbara City Council race, we're also starting this huge North County effort at the same time. So.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your story? I used to work for Doss Williams. I worked for you, worked with you. I don't really know a whole lot about you other than, that period of your time. You're from Santa Maria, but can you talk a little bit about just you growing up and how you got involved in politics and how it became such a passion for you?
Yeah. I'm not, I grew up in a political home, I guess, but not super political. My parents were huge Democrats, huge Bill Clinton fans. I remember in first grade, someone told me that Bill Clinton wanted to kill babies. And I said, that's not true. I had no idea what they were talking about. I just immediately defended Bill Clinton. So, I definitely grew up in a Democratic household, but it wasn't like a politically engaged household, so to speak, like locally or anything like that. And then I went to UCSB, where I went to school to be a teacher, a history teacher specifically. And I had to take a women's studies class, and Hannah Beth Jackson was a guest speaker in that class. And she did what she does to so many people, which is got me super excited about, our local elected officials and what they're about. And so when I went to graduate, the history department sent out an email for an internship on Hannah Beth Jackson's state Senate campaign in 2008. So this is the one she lost to Tony Strickland. And I applied for an internship. I got it. And Doss was the field director on that campaign, Doss Williams. So he hired me as a paid canvasser on that campaign. And then he thought I had some talent when it came to talking to voters. So he suggested me also for Helene Schneider's campaign for mayor. And so I worked on Helene Schneider's campaign in 2009. And then I worked on Doss's assembly race in 2010 as an organizer. And then he hired me at the assembly, and I've continued to, there's a period of time where I would take leaves of absences from the assembly to run campaigns. And then I sort of stopped doing, I stopped doing that when we moved over to the county. But I was still obviously volunteering a lot in our political campaigns.
What is that work like? I think that a lot of people don't understand how difficult the work of an organizer is. Somebody who devotes their 24/7 to helping another candidate during an election. It's not easy. I mean, obviously I've done a little bit of that. I know how much work it is, and I have a lot of appreciation for people who do that. Can you talk about what that entails? I mean, what is your life like? You don't really have much of a life other than what you're actually doing for your candidate, right? I mean, You talk about canvassing and calling and raising money and, spreading the word. It's really kind of a selfless thing. You don't ever get to talk about yourself. You're always talking about, someone else or their platform.
Yeah. And I think for a long time, that's why I liked doing it, because I didn't have to talk about myself. But yeah, it's a really invigorating line of work, though. So I personally love empowering people. I do a lot of mentorship of younger organizers and trying to teach them about organizing and stuff. And when you see other people sort of take ownership of a campaign or feel like empowered, like, voting is one thing, but, actually talking to voters and stuff like that is like multiplying your vote by, by tons. And, seeing people sort of develop that way and put themselves out there. And it's also going to be very nerve-wracking talking to people, but it's so important to our democracy. Like, I'm just, I'm a really big fan of democracy. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, very important that people engage not only in our elections, but also in our public policy. And, we have the same folks who usually make public comment over and over again. And a lot of my career has been dedicated to how do we get folks, how can we get input from folks who don't have the time to sit in a hearing room and get public comment, or now sit on Zoom and you don't know when your name's going to get called. It takes a lot of flexibility in your schedule. And how do we get the input of people who are not able to do that and are often voiceless in our government? And so it's just all a really, really powerful experience that sort of feeds you and keeps you going. It's not for everyone. I've seen a lot of people decide, hey, this life is not for me. I'm sort of at the point where, I don't campaign like I used to. I used to pull 16-hour days, easy peasy. And now I'm like, it's 8 p.m. I got to go home and get ready for bed. So.
Yeah. And it's, what is it, 5 a.m. with the donuts on election day? Get out early. It's an incentive. I always credit you for being addicted to my iced caramel macchiatos from Starbucks. I don't know if you still drink those, but I always think of you when I order mine, because I'm like, I remember those days. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little about Darcel Williams. Obviously he's been an amazing mentor to a whole bunch of people over the years. A lot of people, he can be sort of controversial. People who don't know him sort of see him as one way, but for those who saw him from the beginning and how he rose up, he mentors people. He mentors a lot of young women. He gives people leadership opportunities. He's always employed a lot of females on his staff. And he also puts the work in. He's not one of these go do it, but I'm not going to do it kind of people, regardless of what you think of his votes or whatever, he puts the work in. And I know you two have a strong bond. So can you talk about what it's been like to be with Darcel Williams for his journey from city council to assembly to I know you weren't with him on city council, but just kind of knowing the whole process to where he's at right now, and what's that been like? You guys are super politically tight, you guys have that bond.
Yeah. I think exactly what you said about the mentorship and leadership development. If Darcel didn't give me total freedom to work on whatever I want to work on, I probably wouldn't have worked with them for 13 years. I feel extremely fortunate. I know he feels fortunate to have me. It's really nice to know someone so well. I know him inside and out, and so I know the way his brain works. So I can say, easily yeah, Darcel supports this, or Darcel does not support this. There's a few times I need to talk to him about something. But usually it's more of a strategy call of hey, let's talk this out and decide what we're going to do, because there's a couple different ways this could go. But it's an extremely empowering role, and especially to be in that role since I was a young woman, in the assembly. Darcel always empowered me a lot to work on whatever I wanted to, including the Cliff Drive situation where we moved it from a highway to a city street, and I was like, I think we can do this, let's do it. And Franklin Neighborhood Center, or the Franklin Service Center, and the creation of the Isla Vista Community Services District. Those were all really rewarding things to get to work on. And those were things that, I sort of said I wanted to work on, and he was like, yeah, go for it. Whatever you want to do. So, he fully trusts me and I trust him. And so it's a pretty unique situation. And, he fully supports me also being my own person and, being party chair. He recognizes that I've got to watch out for everyone, all of our Democratic electeds, and so he fully supports my independence also.
Did you get involved with the Coastal Commission thing? Were you able to, did you have to choose, stay out of it, or how did you navigate that conversation?
Well, I think you talked to Das about it when he was on your podcast. But he was working really closely with Meagan that whole time. They talked a lot, and especially like you said, supporting young women. I mean, Das told me, he said, well, being on the Coastal Commission has always been a dream of his. So he didn't want to take himself totally out of the running. And also we have the ability to appoint a supervisor or nominate a supervisor. So, but he said, but Meagan and I, we have the same values, and she's younger and she's a woman. So isn't she better than me actually? And I told him, yeah, she is actually probably better than you. So, he kept his name in and tried for it, but he was also supporting Meagan the whole time. And they talked a lot during that whole process. So I definitely didn't see it as the two of them competing. I've told Meagan, I think it's totally great that, the media is portraying it as like she, I mean, and she did a huge feat of getting chosen over someone who has worked in this field for over 20 years and has over 20 years of postal policy. It just shows how smart she is and how politically capable she is. And so, I was just super happy for Meagan and felt very happy with that whole situation. And I'm also happy that Das doesn't have to be on Coastal Commission meetings and we don't have to figure out all of that stuff.
Yeah, more work. I always say Meagan is the new Das Williams. She's like what he was, like this. Who is this person? They're gonna go as far as they want to go, and just have all this like great sort of policy knowledge, So it's interesting to sort of see them, her at this stage of her career, and Das is, still very influential at the Board of Supervisors. Hey, I want to bring this around full circle. Just as we wrap up here, what do you say to somebody who says, I don't know who to vote for. I kind of like Cathy, but hey, I kind of want to give James a chance too. He seems like a really good guy. He worked for Hannah Beth, and he's done good in the community. Who do I vote for? What's the argument that you're making for somebody who's torn between, a progressive and a Democrat, a liberal Democrat?
Yeah, and I've had voters ask me that question, and I tell them my relationship with James, and I think James is great, and that it's not any ding on James. It's that Cathy's done a really great job as mayor. She has a really incredible voting record, which people can see exactly where she stands on all these issues when put to the test, which is something that you don't always get with candidates because they say they're going to do all these things, but it's a totally different animal being in office. She's been on the city council for 10 years now, and you can see what she's done in that capacity. And then I tell people, my fear of Randy Rowse getting elected, and that I don't want to see a conservative mayor in Santa Barbara. I don't think that will be representative of Santa Barbara. And so we've got to pick the person who has the biggest strength to beat Randy. And I think that's Cathy Murillo.
And if it's November 2nd and it's 10:30, or it's November 3rd in the morning, and Randy Rowse is the mayor, and Cathy's second, and James is third, and Deborah's fourth, will the party hold that against Deborah and James? I mean, is that going to be a thing of like, we told you? I mean, what's the conversation around that?
I mean, I think there's going to be people who are really upset about that. I think just with every election, it's like, the aftermath it can be rough. and then something else happens and everyone sort of moves on. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they decided to run for office for something else in the future. It would depend on what the seat is and who they're running against and all of those things, just like with anyone. So, I mean, I don't think that would change much. But I'll tell you, if it shows that Randy's in the lead on November 3rd, it depends by how much. And because we have, ballots keep getting counted until 5 days after. So as long as they're postmarked by election day. So
yeah,
we may not know for sure until like a week later or something. So it really depends.
It's gonna be close. Hopefully it's not another 8 vote, sort of thing like with the city council a couple years ago.
Yeah. Well, it's but that was LA County did that election, so our own Santa Barbara County is doing this election now. So right. And I think that's why they decided not to go with LA because it was.
I want to stretch it out forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even with that, Alejandra and Jason Dominguez race, it was by 8 votes, but we knew pretty much the next day, so hopefully.
Yeah, because the trend was going up, and you know what direction that's going. Okay, yeah. So thanks a lot, Darcel. Appreciate the time and the conversation, and good luck to you. And I know a lot of people are saying you're doing a great job as sort of the new leader of the chair of the party. So keep it up, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thanks, Josh.